Thank you, Stephen. I don't know. You seem to have said a lot of things about me, which even seems like news to me, Stephen. I wish all of them were true. Maybe they're prophetic, and hopefully it will happen, so this morning, I will be sharing my screen because it's a PowerPoint presentation. And uh, I've titled this as Seven Short Stories. So the first time I did this was maybe about a little more than a year ago. I was giving an oration for the Critical Care Society of the India of India, where they had invited me to give the national oration. And I requested that I will not talk on academics or academic topic, but rather just talk about my journey in life. And I said it's as seven short stories. And I realized it's very, very easy to actually witness about Jesus if you don't openly tell them that it is the Bible. So if you look in the book of Corinthians, Paul will be telling us that we are an epistle. And very often, the only Bible your neighbors will ever read is your own life. And I remember once Anand Pillai was speaking to us in a meeting, and he told one of the greatest thing of Daniel was he really never rubbed in his spirituality to uh, uh, that the steward was taking care of them. He told them that I wouldn't eat of the table. Test and see us if we start losing weight, and rather we will eat vegetables. And he said he didn't go and say, because my faith says this so, and because I'm a Christian and I'm a Jew, and he just told what he wanted to do. And sometimes they realize that a lot of people get attracted to Jesus Christ by purely looking at our lives. And believe me, in the current environment, our lives has to be spectacular so that Christ is attracted. And so what I'm going to talk today is not very heavy. You can honestly relax. It's more like several little stories, but many of them had a very lasting impact in my life. And I hope that today you will also be blessed as you listen to this. And later on, I had to do it also for EMFI Kerala, and they asked me, and I was just sharing the same thing to them. And today, when Stephen was talking, and I said, why don't I share this? Because I realized in the Acts of the Apostles, uh, none of the apostles truly talked about any of the miracles of Jesus Christ. They didn't have to because there was so much happening around him. But unfortunately, today, we do not seem to believe in the power of God in any other dimensions. So we tend to be living in this 2000 years past story. So all the stories I'm talking is about the present. And I hope that in some way it will bless you and encourage you. So there it is. So it's called Seven Short Stories, and I hope you enjoy listening to them. The first story. So we are a family of four children, and my elder brother, whose name is Dr. Jacob Cherian, he's a nuclear physicist. Currently, he's a professor of physics at St. Stephen's College in Delhi. He was an exceptionally bright kid from the time he was born, I think. By the time he was 1 year old, he was speaking fluently. By the time he was 2 years old, he could actually even start giving little sermons. So he was generally, like the star performer in our house. And then I came along, and I turned out to be the exact opposite. I started speaking when I was 3 years old and not very impressive. And I was generally considered to be a duffer by my dad, especially. In Malayalam, we have a word, they say potten. They'll say, this guy is a potten. So I grew in that environment, always thinking that my elder brother was exceptionally bright and I was this dunce. And in this class, I was in Kharagpur at that time. My father used to work in the railways in a school called the St. Agnes's Convent. I still remember the school. And, I could find things pretty crazy. For example, when I was in class one, I still got totally confused by my class teacher because she's write several lines on the board, and then she would rub it and start writing all over again. And I was getting so confused why the teacher couldn't make up her mind as to what she really wanted me to copy on that notebook. So I would rub along with her and rewrite all over again. So I still remember when my mom looked at the notebook, she found a crazy page which was rubbed all over and written several times. So, just kind of let you understand why my dad used to think I was a bit crazy. So it was in that environment I grew. Then, of course, I had my brother, younger brother, and sister, and my elder brother who truly was fantastic. By the time he came into class two or one, I don't remember, they found him so good for the class that they gave him a double promotion. And here, for me, it was totally different. When I was in class one, in a class of 21 kids, I would be somewhere around 20. And that's what I thought I fit in because that's what was expected out of me. And I truly believe that I was born to be a dunce, right? And when Stephen was saying that I'd achieved so much, yeah, honestly, I think that I am not embarrassed to say the fact that God gave me much more than I ever dreamed, and that God gave me enormously, enormously, much more than could ever dream in my professional career. And but I want you to know my beginning was this way. I thought I was born to be a dunce. And I was quite comfortable in that environment. My parents really didn't look too much or expect too much out of me. Anyway, class one, two, three. And then I came to class three. In class three, I had a class teacher whose name was Mrs. Naik. Even today, I always wanted to catch up with her, could never catch up with her. I don't even know if she's alive or dead. That was a small school in Kharagpur, and she was the class teacher in class three. Now, she walked up to me one day and asked for my test paper and asked me why I was doing so badly. Now, this was an absolutely crazy question for me because I mean, I thought I was meant to do badly. I mean, what do you mean? Like, why are you doing badly? And then she said, don't you realize you're much smarter than your elder brother? She had taught my elder brother also. Now, that was absolutely insane to me because even at that age, I was convinced that that was a total impossibility. But Mrs. Knight, for some reason, I think it was ordained that she would take this extra interest in my life. So she would look at every single thing I did. Every class, she would ask me questions after that, every homework, every exam, every test. And suddenly I knew there was no escape. And I started taking a lot of attention in my class. And by the time I came to final year, I mean, not final year, I mean, that's an MBBS term. By the time I wrote my final exams in class three, from that 19th, 20 position in 21, I moved to the second position in class, and which was astounding. It was a totally new experience for me. And suddenly I realized it felt so good to do well in class, and suddenly I was getting a lot of attention, and things started changing. And from then, I never looked back. Now, why am I sharing this to you? Many years later, or rather a couple of years ago, I don't know if how many of you know Dr. Manoj. He was the general secretary for EMFI. One day he was talking on the phone and he talked about his extremely interesting book he read called The Power of Habit. This book is written by, actually, he's a reporter, and it is written by this guy whose name is Charles Duhigg. It's an excellent book for all of you all to read. It talks about a simple principle, which is called the reward, the cue, the reward, and the routine. I mean, cue, the routine, and the reward. Maybe someday, if you want, I can summarize this whole book, which I've done a talk which I've given for the young people in my church called The Power of Habit and how Jesus Christ can break us. But the key thing he says is when there is a cue, you set up a routine if there is a reward at the end of it. And what my teacher had accomplished in my life in that 1 year was to make me understand that there was a pleasure in excellence. There's a pleasure in excellence. And I believe that as a believer, I know completely one thing, that my God is a God of excellence. And excellence actually, I believe, flows through believers. And I have absolutely no doubt about that because we have the power of God's Spirit working in us. And that is the Spirit that raised Jesus Christ from the dead. And it is the same Spirit. Actually, if you look in the book of Ephesians, chapter 1, the initial verses, there's a wonderful exercise I've done. I would take Ephesians chapter 1 and I replace every us into me, or I. Like it says that God has blessed me with every spiritual blessing in heavenly places. Or he would say, like, that God chose me even before the foundations of the earth, and he raised me up to sit on the right hand of God, and I'm seated in the heavenly places. And this beautiful prayer that Paul will make, and Lord, I pray that the eyes of their heart may be open, that they may know of the power that exists within them. And just to tell you back, so I believe that excellence is a part and parcel of every believer. And if you're not having excellence in your life, it's time you ask God as to where you're going wrong, because it's the Spirit of Christ. It's the same Spirit of, the Word of God says, and out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water. And it's that authority with which you do things. So coming back to this, so what she didn't realize is she put me in this amazing cycle where the cue was, you know, when you do well, you get recognized and people start loving you, or not just people loving you, realize that you you there is a beautiful feeling as you feel the pleasure of God upon you, as you feel the pleasure of God upon you. Let's carry on with what I wanted to say. So here it is. I believe finally this morning, for every parent who's sitting here, that you have to believe that God does not make mistakes. Every child that is there in your hands, every student. See, we have a DNB program in radiology and a DNB program in interventional radiology. We were the first center in the country to have an interventional radiology program as a DNB, which is like a DM. And when I started this program, our failure rate in our DNB program was like 50%. For the last 14 years, we have got 100%, year after year after year after year, simply focusing on one fact, that every child that has come into my department has not come to be a failure, but to succeed. So some people may ask, how do you do it? Of course, we have a very strong academic curriculum and a lot of things that go on, but we believe that God Spirit can transform the lives of any child. And I want you to, that's why I encourage you to believe this fact, that your child is also excellent. This is a poetry that I had written some time ago. It was written actually keeping one of my consultants who was working with me. Now, the problem was he was extremely bright, brilliant guy, but everybody told me, don't take him into the department. He's extremely difficult. He's really bad. He is a guy you cannot work with. Today, he's extraordinary. The kind of achievements he's made is phenomenal. It's just not one. Several of my consultants who work with me, they came with peculiar baggages, and over the years, they have excelled. I just want to make you aware, this is something that I had written, but I think it can make sense to all of you wherever you work. When you say, I've got a difficult colleague or somebody, it's written, he was angry, he was sad, and everyone told me that he was bad. He walked alone with an I don't care look. Deep down, he knew that he was an unread book. A book by its cover you shall not judge, but like many, my impressions would not budge. An uncut diamond is easy to discard. Polished and cut, it can have the highest regard. So I took this book, read it page to page, a story unfolded that I never gauged. The cover was dark and the picture so bad, I never imagined that a jewel it had. I took up the book cover and all, did a makeover so it could enthrall. As years went by, a change I saw, a star in the sky that now filled me with awe. I pray every day as I see the sparkling light that I changed my fixed impressions not to blind my sight. A tiny seed, when watered, grows tall. A considerate hand will empower them all. The reason why I say that, so often people come and ask me to pray and say, I'm having a very difficult colleague. I wanted to pray that somehow he will move away from a department. And, every individual, I believe, can be transformed if you're willing to invest time into them. I'm talking about people. I used to sit day after day, making them see how good they were, trying to channelize their energy into ways that could be a blessing for others, and they have excelled. And I do not know whether you are one of those who feel that people have not understood you, or maybe you are working with a colleague, or you got a child you think who's not good enough. But I want you to understand today that this is the truth about all of us. The Word of God tells you that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My child is fearfully and wonderfully made. My son was a very average student in school. And very often, when I used to go to school, he would have flunked in Hindi and just really, really bad with languages. And he would ask me, and my daughter was like right on the top of the class. He'll ask me, Dad, are you embarrassed about me? And I used to always tell him, Arun, God never gives me the second best. You are the best, the perfect son for me. And I want you to invest this, speak this blessing upon your children, speak this blessing upon difficult people, and ask God to give you grace to invest into them, to make them realize there is something exceptionally wonderful about them because they are fearfully and wonderfully made. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was knit together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. It's the most astounding thing. Even before that embryo was created in my mother's womb, God knew me, God had planned for me, God had numbered my days. And we are created to be the reflection of God's glory. And I believe that in whatever sphere you are, in whatever place you are. And that's the first story. The first story is to make you understand that there are no average people that are around you. They're exceptionally talented. Ask God to give you that eyes that you can see. I, who was considered a duffer, somebody who was considered to be a total useless kid, in the end of the class could be transformed by one single teacher on whom God spoke to speak to me and changed me from a failure to be the topper in the class. And I never looked back. Where the teacher could open my eyes to taste the pleasure of excelling. And I just pray that you don't give up on people. Like I said, our DNB program, sometimes, like very often, because the center is so well known, the top 100, 200 rankers will be joining us. But having said that, our DNB interventional program is so difficult that, this year, the first two ranks were taken by CMC Veloz DM program. And after that, they came to our center, leaving centers. I've got students who have passed out from AIMS, who are actually done the MBBS and MD, who joined us for these courses purely because they see something in us which transforms ordinary people to do extraordinary quality of work. And I just want you to understand that you and I are also called to be channels to take people and transform them to experience the excellence of Christ in their lives. From now on, I go to the second story. The title of the story is called The Broken Scooter. It's an astounding story of a miracle that made me into a doctor. By now, my father was transferred and he was in Orissa, right? And because my father was getting transferred very frequently, we bought a little house in Bhubaneswar, and we were living in Bhubaneswar when I wrote the entrance exams. So when I was in Orissa, so I wrote the entrance exam for the medical college in Orissa, and I applied and I got the admission. But when the letter for admission came, they sent another document saying that when I would come for my admission, I had to bring a certificate from the collector saying that I was a permanent resident of Orissa. Now, technically, I could never be a permanent resident of Orissa, but actually, there was a clause in the prospectus which clearly says that if your father is a central government employee and is posted in the state of Orissa, then he's entitled to apply as somebody who is equivalent. Now, the problem was this was crazy because we didn't know whom to go and approach. So my father went to the principal. The principal said, no, I cannot do anything. I cannot change this. You have to go and get a letter from the health secretary. And the health secretary was an impossible person to meet. So I still remember the last date of joining was the 1st of September. And by 20th of August, I'd kind of given up the idea of joining medicine. And I was 17, 18, and didn't even realize how important or what it would do to my life. And on 20th evening, a friend of mine who had left school like me, and he was now studying in Loyola College, Chennai, had actually come back home. And he was driving his scooter on a road which was some 100 meters from my house, and his accelerator cable broke. Since he had cable broke and he had nowhere to go, he actually pushed that scooter and came to my house. And when he came to my house, he told me that, hey, what are you doing? I thought by now you'd have joined medical college. And I told him, this is the problem. And this is what has happened. And he said, you know something? I don't know if you realize it, but my dad has come back to Bhubaneswar. His father was an IS officer. He was posted in Delhi for many years. And he said, actually, he's come back as the chief secretary of Orissa. So why don't you come and meet him tomorrow morning? I'm sure he can sort it out. And actually, I knew his dad because we were friends in school. So I went over there, and the chief secretary of Orissa looked at the prospectus and said, this is ridiculous. He said, that should never happen. So he told us to sit in his office room and type out a letter. So we typed out a letter, 4 lines, to the health secretary, government of Orissa. I have been given this letter, which is telling me to join. But however, based on this clause, I'm entitled to join this medical college, and I will be grateful if you could kindly correct this for me. He came back after lunch with a letter from the secretary of the health secretary of Tamil Nadu telling the government of Orissa is pleased to give you admission into the medical college. Sounds crazy, isn't it? I was always wonder, why did they make that little mistake? Even more amazing, if his scooter did not break, I would never be a doctor. I would never have done any of the things that Stephen talked about or people talk about today. And what does this teach me? Every single time, Paul, in the letter to Corinthians, in the second letter, in chapter 12, he talks about, the point where he says that, that 3 times I was tested. 3 times he asked God for the thorn in the flesh. And after that, he says, I will boast of my infirmities. And Paul says also, why was this given to me? This was given to me lest I become proud of the revelation that God has done in my life. And every time, I used to always tell my wife, you know what I should do? I should frame an accelerator cable and keep it in my room to remind myself every single day that if God had not broken that accelerator cable, I would be probably nothing today. I have no clue what I would have done in my life. And that is my God. So one of the problems I find with many, many of us is we have the sense of entitlement. Some people I've seen, they get so agitated because the security in the hospital may just ask you to show your ID card. And he says, how can you do that to me? I find my colleagues, the sense of entitlement, this is not right, that's not right, I'm not getting the privileges I need. And it's always the feeling that I am the greatest. Sometimes the patient question you too much, I am the greatest, and I get upset. Sometimes when somebody tells you something and tells you, sir, I find you extremely difficult to work with, and you feel so upset because the sense of entitlement drives me always to feel that I'm something. My wife used to tell me this, and I believe it's true, that doctors are some of the most arrogant people that walk on this earth. Because we get glory at all times, and people come and tell you you're like God, and I with false humility will tell them, no, it's nothing, you must thank God. But if he actually treats you like that and comes and tells you, I'm so grateful that God was with you, doctor, I know it is a complex surgery, without God you would have killed my relative, that's the time you can understand how you feel. One time it was Dr. Kyo John who told us so beautifully, and he said, I have seen people who talk about humility, but the day they are treated badly, you can see the way they behave. For a Christian, I want you to understand the most important thing in our life is to give up the sense of entitlement. Every day I have to remind myself, I was not entitled to become a doctor of any grandeur. I was probably going to be something, because I would have just lost it if God had not brought, his name is Chandramouli. He just recently retired from the IS because he also became an IS officer. If God did not break down his scooter, did not bring him back from Chennai all the way to Bhubaneswar for spending 2 weeks at his home, I would have never got anything of these in my life. And that's why every day I remind myself that I am just a mechanic working on God's most amazing creation. It was several years ago when I was once conducting a live workshop in MHCTC, which is Military Hospital Cardiothoracic Center in Pune. And that was the first time that angioplasty was being performed in a military hospital, and we were doing it live for all the army doctors, and I mean the armed forces doctors. And I had to also give a lecture on Sunday, and I was feeling kind of a little bad, saying, Lord, that it's Sunday. Later on, God made me understood that 7 days a week is Sunday for believers. There's no difference in the way we worship God, and we testify God. So I still remember it was the Army Vascular Surgeon Kumud Roy who was speaking ahead of me, and right now he is a consultant in I think Mary City, and he went ahead and was talking about the brilliance of his surgery and the kind of work he did. And as he was speaking, God was speaking to me and making me understand that truly how small I was. I still remember I got up and I told this. I said, I'm very impressed with what Dr. Kumit spoke, but I want to talk to you and tell you that I am just a mechanic. I said, I'm just a mechanic because even today, if God doesn't heal, people will die. If the immune systems don't work, people will die. I have still not learned to make a new kidney. I borrow somebody's kidney and fix it up and then think I'm so great because I managed to take an old engine of another car and bring it. I've still not learned to make an engine of a car myself. And I told that I just remind myself every morning that I am a mechanic. But the only difference I told him was this, that I am working on God's most precious creation. And I told them something. Imagine that you got a fantastic luxury car. Let's say that you are driving a Mercedes S-Class and on the roadside you got a breakdown. And you find this little mechanic over there. And you tell him, can you fix the car? And this guy opens up the car and you're really worried what he's going to do to that car. And I said, I feel that is how God feels when I'm touching God's creation. So every time it's like saying, Mathew, be careful. He is very precious to me. And this is something I teach every student. I said, look, I give you my 100%. I teach you to excel. But promise me that you'll remind yourself every single day that you are touching God's most precious creation. A privilege that no human has of going into something that is so personal, and he gives himself completely to you, surrenders himself. You anesthetize him. You take away every protective mechanism of him. You go right into his body to do whatever you want. And I tell myself every day, Lord, thank you for this amazing privilege. Thank you, God, for trusting me every day. Just yesterday, when I was working on somebody's brain, and I was seeing God, one small error, and he will be paralyzed forever. He's a 22-year-old boy. Thank you, God, for trusting me. And when families come and talk to you and tell you, always remind yourself and tell them this, you must understand that God's grace was running through us at all time. All my fellows, everybody knows that we treat humans with extreme respect, with love and care and humility, because this is a privilege that God's given us. Sometime back, I think it was Dr. Kurvila Worki or Kyo John was talking and telling this beautiful statement. Every time in life, you ask you this question, are you a parasite or are you a source of inspiration? The day entitlement comes to you, There you feel entitled for honor, entitled for respect, entitled for comfort, entitled for many things in your life. You become a parasite. You want people to serve you at all times. Sometime back, one of my consultants was sitting in front of me and telling that, thank you so much for doing this for me. And, I never expected you to. I just, do you know something that I am your servant? And said, don't be joking. I said, no, I'm talking about servant leadership. That is what the Bible teaches us to always consider others above yourself and to love your neighbors as yourself. And Kierkegaard told a very beautiful statement. He said, a parasite only knows to take. And the day the parasite starts giving, the parasite will die. It's true. That's why they are parasites. And there are many people like that in the society. Even many Christians and many believers are parasites. Receive, 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 receive. Bible study after Bible study after Bible study after Bible study. This meeting, that meeting, that meeting. When will you start giving? When will you start realizing it's some time in my life that I should allow the Holy Spirit to be poured out on people that have become a source of healing around me? That's why, one of you was sharing and telling, that you are the salt. Are you the salt? Have you understood what is being the salt? Salt is the most amazing thing. Without salt, food has no flavor. It's insipid. Tonight for afternoon, somebody may have decided to make the most amazing biryani. No salt, it's horrendous. Put salt, every flavor comes to life. But nobody talks about the salt. It is completely lost in the environment, so much in the background that it is not seen, it is not heard, but it is felt. And that is salt. Nobody will say, sister, you got your biryani perfect. The salt was flawless this time. No, nobody says that. They talk how wonderfully you made it. And being the salt is something as amazing as that, that when you are there, you transform the place. People are giving their best. People are doing amazing things because you can bring the best out of people's lives. And yet nobody talks about you. The other day, I was telling my colleagues, that I'm preparing for retirement, and they said, "See, you cannot be thinking of that, because you are so full of energy." And I said, "Look, we plan." And I said, the best HOD is one whose absence is never felt. You make a system in place that it works efficiently, and you can be nearly jobless. I just want you to understand, because believe me, some of the most difficult people I have found to work with is Christians. They're so self-centered because they're so puffed up with the feeling they are wonderful, super righteous people beyond correction. I want to ask yourself, are you a source of inspiration for people around you? Do people feel excited because you're there? Do they know that they can fall on you and you can take care of so many of their issues in life? And if you do, that you are right in God's God's plan for your life. And that's why in Philippians, Paul says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Not looking at your own interest, but on each of you on the interest of others. I'll come back to this in greater detail a little later. Today, I want to say that for every one of you who's involved in the ministry of healing, that all of us have been called out in the most amazing ways. In my case, it was an accelerator cable. In your case, it would be something else. We were not entitled to any of these. Even if you're one of the spectacularly brilliant people, understand, you didn't come with that brilliance. God gave you that gift even before you were created. And you can't take pride in a gift that God has instilled in you. The third story, the ugly room. What's the ugly room? By now, I've finished my MBBS. I was a university ranker, and I thought the easiest place for doing my MD was in the college that I passed out in Odisha. My vision was that much. And that's what I thought. Again, I applied. Again, I got back the same letter. Again, the same clause. But this time, my friend's father was not there to solve the problem for me. So there was nowhere to go. And during that time, there was a big gap. This big gap was the entrance exam for the PGs were some 8 months or 9 months. And at that time, I took up a junior residence post in Railway Hospital, Perambur. I was about 23 years old. All my friends were going to other colleges for a junior residency. I decided to come here because my mother had a hole in her heart, an AST, in 1985, and she needed a correction. My father being in the railways, the railway hospital was also the best center in the country at that time with KM Cherian. After that, I was not getting a PG seat anywhere. It was terrible. Actually, it's so bad. I remember writing a letter to Vinod Shah asking, shall I join IEM? And Vinod Shah said, I prayed and I feel that you should probably study further. Nobody wanted me. It humbled me. It knocked me completely. Whatever glory I had in the undergrad where I was excelling was all taken away. And finally, I had a letter from a cousin of mine who's never written a letter, only one letter in his whole life. And that was had the application for JIPMA in Pondicherry. Well, I applied that letter. I applied for general medicine, and don't ask me why I applied for radiology. Even today, I don't know, but I just felt maybe radiology for some reason. And I didn't get the medicine seat there. JIPMA was impossible for somebody to enter because the system was 100 marks for your theory, 100 marks for a viva, which was by their own profs, 100 marks for spotters, which was also the kind of things they saw before. Anyway, I got a diploma seat in radiology. I went to JIPMA and took up radiology not because I wanted radiology, but because I had nothing else to do. And when I reached JIPMA, this was a condition. It was the worst department in JIPMA. Worst, honestly. My prof was Professor Srivastava. Later on, he liked me a lot, but he was an extremely difficult man. We had an old image intensifier, some old tanks, and in the box, bundles and bundles of old films packed like this, or lying loose, lots of it. Now, it's amazing. If you start trusting that God does not make mistakes in your life, and God has positioned you there because He's got plans for you, God can take dung and make it into gold, believe me. And I'm not joking. And sitting over there, for the first 1 month, I was depressed, frustrated, wondering where I had landed up. And then something happened. I suddenly realized this dung was actually a gold mine. As I started going through these films, I realized they had just about every kind of case you can imagine on the earth. So I classified them. If it was chest x-rays, every finding on chest x-rays was skeletal x-rays, and made them into fantastic classifications. And I started taking classes. Very soon, the department became so popular that I used to have a whole register. From 8 to 9 class for the medical PGs, 9 to 10 classes for the pediatric PGs. After that, classes for the surgical PGs. And slowly I realized that was amazing. That actually we became so popular and people wanted the department and classes became so interesting. And honestly, it would start transforming my life. This is not from the Bible, but I still want you to understand there's some secular teachings which are also can be beautiful. I was very inspired by the story by Mark Twain, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer is asked to whitewash a fence. Horrible, mundane job. But somehow he managed to make it look so attractive that sometime later, a lot of people were actually queuing up and paying him money to just paint their fence. He made it look like it was the most glamorous job on the earth. When somebody came to ask him, he said, no, you can't do it. You can't do it because my mom doesn't trust anybody else. It has to be perfect. And finally, kids were falling over each other, begging to get a chance to whitewash the fence. And finally, Tom Sawyer would sit on the lawn get everybody else to whitewash that fence, and he also had a pocket full of goodies that he collected. I want you to understand a very important thing in life. Your perspective about your job changes others' perspective about you and your job. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Your perspective about your job changes other perspective about you and your job. Now, for example, if you're sitting in a department and you decided, oh, it's a horrible job, oh, I'm an MRD officer, it's a horrible job, I am just a nurse and it's a horrible job, and no, I am actually looking after some branch which is not great. Or you understand this is something unique. God had created this job just for me, and I'm going to excel and do amazing things over here. That's what sets out the ordinary and separates him towards excellence. You know, I the life in Jipma was phenomenal for me. As soon as I started understanding that this is where God had positioned me, and I started understanding this truth that I could excel and do the best of what was available, God started doing unusual things for me. The cardiologist, chief of cardiology, Dr. Balachandra at Mathew, I'm 23 years old. He says, look, I heard you worked in Railway Hospital, Perambur. Can you help us start a cardiac angiography program? When you're 23, if you asked me to do cardiac surgery, I said I could do it, Today, I would be a lot more careful. I said, yeah, why not? And believe me, I started as a postgrad, the first angiography program in JIPMA. I did the first pulmonary valvuloplasty there, did the first renal angioplasty there, did the first peripheral angio, the first cardiac angio, showing them how to do it. And it was unbelievable. It was the most satisfying years of my life. And in JIPMA, they used to have a lot of yellow oleander poisoning. People had come with complete heart block. And it was a standing instruction over there that any postgraduate can try to put a temporary pacemaker from 3 axes, 2 legs and 1 hand, or 2 hands and 1 leg. But one should be always kept for me in case they couldn't, so that I could come and do it. 2 o'clock in the night, I'll get a call, somebody coming, can you sort it out? It was unbelievable. Coming from a center in Orissa, remember when I came to JIPMA, people really looked down. There were guys who say, I thought you will be wearing a loincloth when you came, It was as bad as that. But God could do astounding things in that place. By the end of my first year, the professor of the Department of Medicine came and told me, he said, why don't you apply for medicine? We think you should get into medicine. By that time, I realized that radiology was probably the biggest future and it would not be medicine. So cut a long story short, my chief asked me to rewrite the exam. I got my MD in radiology. I continued over there, then went to a postdoctoral in Sri Chitra where I learned interventional radiology in 1990, which was in its infancy. But I want you to look at the slaves. Your job is to obey your masters, not with the idea of currying favor, but with a sincere expression of your devotion to God. Whatever you do, put your whole heart and soul into it as into work done for God and not merely for men, knowing that your real reward, a heavenly one, will come from God since you're actually employed by Christ and not by your earthly master. I want you to believe, I don't know where you're positioned today. Maybe you feel it's mundane, maybe you feel it's horrible. Ask God to give you wisdom to say, I'm going to make this extraordinary. I'm going to be the best watchman, the best liftman, the best nurse, the best ward boy, the best doctor, the best director. I do not know what you are. But ask God to truly make you the salt of that place. Don't just imagine salt and just say something. Say, God, I want to be that salt of that place. I want to transform that place. I want to give a flavor to that place that nobody has ever seen before. And I pray that God will fulfill that in your life. I go on to the next story, which is called The Dreamer. So from there, I used to dream, and I dreamed that God will enable me to build up a center that was absolutely excellent in interventional radiology. In 1991, I came to this hospital. It was a brand new hospital. Equipment were not suitable for interventional radiology. The hospital finances were low. They were unable to stop good inventory of disposable. Nobody knew about IR. The initial patients were extremely poor. It looked hopeless. But I want you to understand the one thing of hope in this barrenness was the hospital did not say no to me starting interventional radiology. Even CMC Vella was not interested. And I want you to understand, do not let anybody destroy the dream that God's given in your life. If God's given you this wonderful dream that you should start interventional radiology, or God wants you to start a center of excellence or whatever it's there in your life, don't give up that dream. People may say that's not true. But God instilled these amazing dreams in your life. The hospital did not say no, and we started. So it was difficult. We made our own coils. We charged no fees. We got material through friends. I used super glue and stuck catheters. And what happened in the years was astounding. God started partnering with us in amazing ways. And we slowly started growing and growing and growing and growing. And it's astounding how much God made us grow. To the end of the day, this was Abdul Kalam who had come to release the book of mine. You know, it is astounding what God could help. But we also made sure that we were scientific people. We ensured that we published and we worked and we had papers all over the place to ensure that we wanted people to see the glory of God manifest in our life through the work of excellence. I still remember one day I was talking to Dr. CMC Vella and he was talking about humility and how you're such an average physician. I said, there is nothing to be humble when you're average. First excel, become something, and then talk about humility. What is there in two beggars talking about humility? I said, Today he started excelling in his field and he told me that, I realized what you said. And he's become a role model for people to follow. Humility is not becoming average in life. That is pure laziness. Humility is when you achieve something and then you are so down to earth and so approachable in people's life. This is where we started. This is what we have. This is the world's most advanced angiographic suite, which was purchased by my management just for me. It's a 9 crore lab where we train and we do some of the most astounding procedures. Where did it start? With nothing, with absolutely no equipment that was close to it, as God started partnering with us, as we gave 100% to do what we felt was a dream. We were the first people in Asia to also set this up, a stroke ambulance for people, where this is an ambulance which also has a CT scanner inside it. It became a prototype. It took so much time to build it, but we persevered and persevered, and we got the best prototype currently available in Asia. The government of Assam has now taken this as a project and they started doing. The government of Delhi is now taking it as a prototype on what to do it. And it's astounding because it actually has got a CT scanner inside. We go right to the closest petrol bunk and we do this. Just to tell you that you can excel in all fields as you truly believe that God has called you to do great things even on this earth. Just tell you the details. Let us go fast. It was actually Roosevelt's wife who says this. Is a beautiful statement. He says, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. People will pull you down. I remember when I was working and I started interventional radiology, I was the lowest paid doctor in the hospital at that time because I didn't know how to bargain for a salary. And after some time when I was doing procedures, 2 years later, I went to my director and the chairman. I told him, sir, since I'm doing this procedure, can you give me a small increment in the salary? And he told me, I was planning to give you because you asked, I won't give you. Today, he's my closest friend. Today, he'll call up and say, I think that your salary is not good enough. I'm just going to give you another hike. And I'll say, you can't be doing that. He said, no, I want to do that for you. I want you to understand nobody should destroy a dream. I could have said the management is so mean. He doesn't understand the skills that I have. I will not work with him anymore. That at the same time, Just Locos invited me to come and start a department in interventional radiology. I did not do it because I was not led at all to do that. I continued to work over there because the dream was something that God had given me. And however mean somebody could be, I did not want them to destroy the dream. And this is something I tell my colleagues also. Don't let people around you destroy the dream because you are the only one who know your dream. And if you don't believe in that dream, nobody else will believe in your dream. And I want to just remember this is beautiful. This is what God talks to you from Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 20. Now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is in work with us. God will finally do immeasurably more than you can ever imagine. But what we need to know is to hold on, not let our pride rule, not let our emotions rule, but to know and say, Lord, if this is where you position me. My initial 4 or 5 years here was difficult, but as we hung on, God did do miracles in our life. I'm coming towards the end, but this probably is going to be one of the most important lessons that I learned in my life. By now, I was around 55 or 56 years old, and I'd realized that I had come up this ladder a long way. I mean, I would become like a tall flagpole with my flag shining. Into the hospital was celebrating me, and I was all over this place, and it was fantastic. So one day, a colleague of mine wanted me to come to Bangalore to see a piece of equipment that they wanted to start a procedure. I was just doing it more because, okay, let's have a look. But on the way back, this doctor told me something which is very interesting. He said, Sir, I've watched you over the last so many years, and I have a dream. I too want to become like you in a field. And I said, So what's your interest? And this person was interested in women's imaging and mammography and that. I said, I have a dream too. Can you help me grow so that I can become something like you in this field that I want? I put this to tell you this, that I felt I was the deaf old man. I had so many consultants working around me. I'd never ever taken time to call them and ask them whether they had a dream in their life. Never call them and ask them whether they wanted to do something beautiful and whether I, in some way, could be a help for them. What I had done, I had become a slippery pole, made sure that there was nobody who was going to come this way. And I realized that God was asking me to become a ladder. A ladder is different. You allow people to step on you. It can be painful at times because not everybody is grateful or appreciate the fact, but you allow them to grow. And then we did something else. I called every single person in my department and I talked to them and told me, tell me, what is your dream? Some people did not have a dream. I helped them focus in a dream. Some people had dreams and they started building. So we divided our department into a center of excellence for breast imaging, for vein centers, for musculoskeletal imaging, pediatric, cardiac, fetal medicine, and each of these divisions started doing very well. And why? How could they do well? It was easy, I realized. There's a song by George Coban that says, I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to much more than I can be. This is the song that Joseph Copan is singing when he's talking that, Lord, when I am on your shoulders, you raise me up to much more than I can be. But remember one thing, we are the salt of this earth. Remember one thing, I am the image of Christ on this earth. In other words, the only Christ that people will see is me. And in other words, I can be the shoulder for them to stand. And I realized it was so easy with the contacts I had, with the influence I had with the administration, with my hospital, with the companies, that I could raise people up so easily. And I started doing that. And I want you to do it. If you are in any management position, any senior position, it's time you call your people over and ask, do you have a dream? And can I be a ladder for you? I wouldn't mind you climbing on my shoulders so that you can be raised up much more than you can be. Believe me, it's a great journey. And that's why in Philippians chapter 4, he said, not looking at your own interest, but on each of you to the interest of others. We started doing amazing things. I have got some of my students today who is faculty in the Harvard Medical School. We approach them. They arrange a program for me that every consultant who works with me spends 3 years in Harvard Medical School in an area of their choice. They come back equipped much better. And we started doing revolutionary things to help them, to build them, to make them grow. I had to fight with the management to give them salary during that time. Finally, I could get them at least 50% salary. But what I'm trying to say, do you understand that you can be an amazing ladder? I know it's great to be a flagpole. People will say it's awesome, it's wonderful, you're so good. But God has not called us to be flagpoles. He has called us to become shoulders for others to stand on so that they can be much more than you can be. And I praise God that I got this opportunity one day, that God could open my eyes and understand and say, listen to the needs of people around you. I'm coming towards the end of my stories, the last two. And this is called Breaking Sandcastles. There's a picture my daughter had drawn up with me, and I want to talk about this. It's very easy for us to destroy the dreams of people around us. So I had a young doctor training with me, and he was working with me, and I was doing a particularly complicated procedure where actually he was not assisting me well, and I was having a lot of problems. There was a lot of actually we were doing actually an aneurysm where we were doing total percutaneous, where there is no surgical cut down at all. So there are lots of bleeding that can take place. And it was getting so bad, so bad. I was getting angry. I was getting restless. So I screamed at him and told him, can you just get out of this place? You're so messy. And I called a junior officer and asked him to assist me. And there were nurses over there. There were people over there. And he was humiliated beyond his imagination because he was a boy with self-respect. So finally, when the whole procedure was over, he actually met me, and I was in the console. I was just looking, and his name was, let's just call him Rahul or something for the time being. So Rahul came and told me, he said, sir, I cannot work under you. He said, you're so difficult, you're so arrogant, and you can be so nasty that I cannot work. I'm giving my resignation right now. At that point, the first thing that came into my mind was tell him, the Rahul, if you think this is difficult, I think you should just quit. Like I'm telling him, you should just quit because interventional radiology is tough. And it is so difficult that if you are not going to quit, then you'll quit another month or so. Because that's how we train people. I was the boss. I was, like you said, the celebrated interventional radiologist. This was a 30-year-old boy, half my age. He could have just swallowed his pride and continued working. At that point, I realized there were two things I could do. One, destroy his dreams forever, or do what was right. So, in front of all the sisters, I told Rahul, I said, Rahul, I'm 60 years old and you're 30. You know that I'm an interventional radiologist, good standing, and today I'm begging you to forgive me. What I did was bad. And I promise you that I will never do it again. But please don't quit. I'll ensure this never happens again. You know, he said nothing. He said, okay, fine, I'll stay. He never told sorry. He never said thank you. He never said a word. But today, he is a fantastic interventional radiologist. He has transformed the place. He's gone to a part of Kerala where he's transformed the scene. The kind of work he does is astounding. I, standing over there, had a choice to destroy him or build him. Today, I want to ask you, are you strong to say sorry? There are so many of us who find it so difficult. We carry these hurts with us. We do not have the courage to go and say sorry. And I pray that you will always, always remember that many people are like just candles in the wind. You have the ability to blow it, or you got the ability to make it shine. And I pray that God gives you the grace to say sorry, whether it's young, whether it's your wife, whether it's your children, whether it's anybody in the very place you were rude. If you insulted your wife in front of your children, tell sorry in front of the children. If you insulted a nurse in front of your colleagues, tell sorry in front of those colleagues, not behind them, and feel good. And I want you to understand that is truly being the salt of the earth again. I do not know whether humility is seen in many people today, but Jesus says one thing. In Timothy, he will tell God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Can you succeed in life if God's opposing you? Can you spread the glory of God if God is opposing you? Because pride was the nature of Satan, of Lucifer. And that is why God says he opposes the proud. Remember one thing, kindness makes you the most beautiful person in the world, no matter what you look like. People will forget everything. People forget Nobel laureates, people forget Olympic champions, people forget everybody. But the people never forget that one person who was kind to him in his life. And that's why it says, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord that he can lift you up. Right? I'll just quickly run through the six things that God hates, it says. Seven that's abomination to him. And the first thing is a proud look. And I just pray that you would have conquered pride in your life through Jesus Christ. And the last is a father and son story. It's a story that my son likes to tell, but I want to tell this to you today. It's a story that happened some time back. One of my son called me suddenly, and luckily I was out of the lab, and he called and said, Dad, I had an accident. And I knew that he was terrified. And I said, what happened? He said, I banged the car in front of me. I knew that probably he did something with his mobile phone or something. I didn't want to ask him anything. So I said, what should I do for you? He said, Dad, I'm scared. And I said, okay, what's happening? He said, this man is screaming at me and shouting at me. So I said, can you give the phone to him? I gave the phone to him and he was shouting. He was saying, your son hit the bumper of my back car. And, I have got an Audi. And along with the Audi, I've got this Amaze. This Amaze is the car I take everywhere. And I am so and so. And I'll make sure. And I finally calmed him down. I told him I'm a doctor here. I told him I'll give my wife's car. Please use it till your car is repaired. And finally he calmed down and told me that, okay, then it's okay. It's fine. He said, you don't have to come, that I will take care of everything. But deep down, I knew that my son was hurting. Maybe he did the wrong thing, but I knew he was hurting. So I decided that I will go and see, and if I could help him. It was a strong, voice in my heart that told, your son needs you, and go. So I went. And I also knew what probably happened was something else. But at that point of time, I did not want any of these thoughts to come into my mind. But I truly wanted to have the heart of my father who looks at my mistakes and graciously forgives me. So I went over there, and this is the scene that I found. This man was screaming at my son. My son was looking all terrified, and he had got the cops over there. They had taken his license, and all this was going on. And then I went over there. I stood in between. I calmed everybody down. I got back his license. Everything settled down. Of course, he was screaming at me for some time. Then he became like friends. I told him that he's got his exam this evening. He's in engineering college, and to just be kind. And then everything settled down. It went so well that he called me later and said, please tell your son to calm down, tell him to write his exam. Then he called me up sometime later, and so the insurance are taking care of everything. Nothing to worry. But all this happened because I went over there. Now, what happened was strange. After this happened, this man left, and I told my son, "Okay, come into my car. I'll ask my driver to pick up your car." And Vince, he was so, looking so nervous, and he started sobbing, and he started sobbing, and I said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Don't you understand one thing? That it's over. We have solved the problem. There's nothing more to cry." And he told me something that was so astounding. The reason I'm telling you is, remember one thing. You never know what opportunity God is going to use in your life to speak to somebody, your son, maybe your child, maybe your neighbor. I have no idea. And unless and until I have the heart of the Lord Himself in my life, I can sometimes do a disaster. So, this is what he told me. He told me something very interesting. He said, Dad, did you know I've got a white car? He said, when you came in that white car and you stood between me and that man, I suddenly understood, he said, what Jesus was doing for me. He said, for the first time, I understood. He said, you are the well celebrated doctor in the city. And you were standing between me and taking all the insults on yourself when it should be for me. After that, he said, they ignored me completely. They screamed at you, they shouted at you, they insulted you, they told me how badly you brought me up. And you took all that up. And finally, you set me free. And I came back absolutely clean with nothing at all. He said, that till now I never understood how God loves me. But in that moment, I could understand Jesus' love more than anything else. He shared that in so many places. The day he said, I accepted Jesus and fully understood him was that day when you stood between me and that man and took all that insult and the shame on yourself. I never thought of anything like that. I actually just went there just thinking I might help. But God was showing a dimension of love to my son that was so radically different. And I could have completely missed out this whole thing. His friend had come to see him because he called his friend for help. His friend was astounded. He said, Arun, the same thing happened to me, and my father slapped me on the roadside in front of everyone else. That your father showed so much of compassion and love. My son has never done that again. For somehow he felt that he would never want me to get into that embarrassment again in his life. But I want you to understand every time something asks, do not react to the situation, but respond in love. And I pray that God gives you that ability. This is the heart of the Father. In whatever messed up situation you are even today, this is the heart of your Father. As He draws you to Himself and says, it doesn't matter how messed up your life is. Maybe the world thinks that you are no good, but I will take those broken pieces and make you into something beautiful. The heart of the Father is the heart of the prodigal son's father who waited all the time. He stopped working, waiting for the son to come home. And I just pray that you will understand this beautiful truth that Jesus, in the presence of God, at this very moment, is interceding for you and me. With that, I come to an end. Maybe I took more than the time, but I still hope you were blessed as I was sharing my life story. Many little incidents that I just put together as a chain to realize that we have been created not to be served, but to serve. I don't think this is the same tagline that you use in a hospital, but I want you to believe that. I want you to truly believe you are the salt. And if you are the salt, you may not get any glory, but you'll transform the place you are to be a place that is far better than it would have been without you. Thank you so much, Stephen, for giving me this opportunity. And I'm sorry if I crossed the time, but I hope that you were blessed as I was encouraged to share it, because every time as I preface my life, God again teaches me that everything I have is a gift from God. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for sharing what you shared today. I don't know if any one of us have any questions that you would like to ask Matthew, and we'll wait for a minute or so. And if we don't have any questions, can I please request Benu to actually close in prayer? Any questions by anyone? Except medical, anything else?
Dr. Matthews, a very good morning, and I'm Juliet. I work for Apollo Hospital, and yesterday I was talking to a interventional radiologist, and it makes so much sense talking to you today. I see the difference between both of you. The first sentence that he started talking to me is, I am a celebrated person.
What's the name? Tell me the name.
His name is Dr. Preetam Chatterjee.
Is it? Okay. I'm not even known.
Yeah, and he said that I've operated on major VIPs, governors, ministers, and so on and so forth. And there's such a lot of difference between you and him. And I just want to ask you that how do you stay grounded in such a big position? And for people like us who, are in managerial roles, heading different places. So how do we remain grounded? We can always be that flagpole, but how do you think that we could be the ladder?
Ask God to keep you grounded. He will keep you grounded. The day I get proud, I get such a complication in my life that God keep me grounded for the next 1 year. I have always realized that the day I tell my colleague, look at that guy, I mean, he must be nuts the way he managed this patient. And I will have some amazing, and I am scared to, honestly speaking. I mean, God keeps me grounded. You want humility, ask God to keep you grounded. Just tell him, Lord, keep me humble. And believe me, he will keep you humble. Like Paul says, the thorn was there to keep him humble. So I also am very, very clear that I would not like to fight with God when he says he opposes the proud. So I am certain about that. How can I work if God is opposing me? So I remind myself every morning that, Lord, please give me grace to remember that I'm not fighting with human. I can't be really going in this journey with you opposing me. So I'm scared. I'm scared of getting proud. I'm not saying that I still don't behave badly at times. I mean, you ask my wife, she will tell you that. Wives know us best. But I always turn around because I know it's too dangerous. It's too risky, you know. It's not worth taking such a big risk in your life. Do tell that you know me and you talk to me, and I don't know who he is. I don't think he's a celebrity, honestly. The most celebrated interventional radiologist in Mumbai is Dr. Vimal Someshwar, Girish Vadavadekar. I mean, these are the best known names.
No, I'm at Chennai actually.
Oh, you're at Chennai? Uh, in Chennai, um, no, I have not heard of this boy really. I mean, Apollo Hospital. Which Apollo is this?
Hospital.
Which branch? I'm sorry.
The main hospital at Greaves Road.
James Road. Okay. I mean, Swati was to be there long back, and they never had a good interventional radiologist for a long time, actually.
Yeah, they have three. There are 3 or 4 of them now.
So, but I mean, that's his view of himself. That's all. You know?
I shall tell him that I heard you today.
Yeah, of course. Do tell him that you met me. You can tell him you were asking about him to me, but don't tell him I don't know him. Maybe someone very recent, honestly. You know.
He's pretty young, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Can you talk a little on discipline on the path of excellence? I'm sure discipline would be a key component. How do you maintain it? What are the challenges? How do you handle that?
I'll just tell you one thing. The first thing you have to understand that you can only desire things, and it's the Holy Spirit that makes it happen in your life. You have to believe that, you know. So you got to really desire things like you hunger and thirst. That's why in the Beatitudes, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness; they will be satisfied." I cannot become righteous. I can only desire righteousness. So the first thing in your life is desire excellence. You say, Lord, I desire excellence, and so give me an hunger for excellence. Once that hunger comes, discipline follows. Forcing a kind of discipline in your life sometimes is not very productive. You start getting very difficult colleagues under you, and also you cannot retain information. So I think in my life, a lot of this, more than discipline, I actually enjoy my work a lot. And I don't feel it's work. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy doing procedures. So God knew me better than I knew myself. So if you ask me, how many hours every day do you read journals? It's not like time. I just sometimes read for a couple of hours based on something in a need or when I review or something. And it's all like that. And honestly, and mm, uh, it's not like I read several chapters. My wife reads 15 chapters of the Bible every day. I don't really do that. I read a lot as I get time, and when I've got even in the department, I may get time, or when I'm teaching, I read and I ask God to speak to me. So I cannot put my discipline onto you, honestly. But I think what you should ask God is to give you a hunger for excellence, for His glory. And remember one thing, that the reason you should hunger excellence is, I always say, humility can only be demonstrated to people who got something worthy to be proud of. When you're such a failure, you're the most average doctor in your hospital, then you talk about humility. It makes no sense, right? So I used to look at Cherian, and I'd say, Lord, if he was a believer, and if he had the humility of Christ, what a wonderful testimony he would be. So it's something like that. So I wouldn't like to push my way of working and what time I wake up. Seriously, I think God will make that happen in your life as long as you hunger to glorify God through the spirit of excellence that flows through you. So it was never hard for me, honestly, because once you love something, it's not hard, right? It's like, suppose you like a dish and you say, how did you discipline yourself to finish that whole bowl? It was tasty, so I finished it, you know. If you love your work, you will love it, you know. So I enjoy it actually. And God gives me a lot of, God actually speaks to me and tells me exactly how to plan. It just comes so naturally because the Spirit speaks to me. And He partners with everything you do, you know. Very often God will say, don't touch this guy, he's going to do badly. And I'm very certain he'll do badly.
Matthew, is it true that, I don't know, I heard this story, I don't know how far it's true, that you actually baptized a patient who was about to die because he came to know the Lord in the bathroom of the hospital?
Not bathroom, the hospital, in the hospital bed. Yeah.
Hospital bed.
Yeah. That is, I shut the door. You know, my hospital is very dangerous. It's, they say they have no problems with religion, but they don't like us teaching, preaching. Having said that, they don't do any Hindu things also great inside the hospital. So this was a very well-known industrialist, and I had looked after his mother, and so I'd become quite close to him, and I was sharing the gospel and telling him in some ways, you know, I don't force myself to share the gospel. When the Lord leads me, I share. And he looked very inclined. Then later he had cancer, secondaries all over his liver, and he was not doing well. So he told me I desire to get baptized. And strangely, a week before, I got an email which said how to baptize somebody dying. You know, so I just took a mug of water and I just poured the water from his head to his toe. But it was beautiful because as soon as I did it, God showed me a beautiful picture of his whole body like covered in white. You know. Very, very special. Yeah, he accepted the Lord. And, you know, it doesn't happen every time, but another time I had a very, very spectacular thing that happened also. This was a lady, many years back, I used to open blocks in the fallopian tubes. I was just telling Stephen yesterday. And but now I have trained another a colleague of mine to do it, a lady. So she had come, and there was no way I could open the fallopian tubes because her uterus was all scarred with tuberculosis and so messed up. So I was telling her that there was nothing we could do. She's not even a candidate for IVF. And she said, you know, my mother-in-law persecutes me so much, and she was crying. Somehow when she was crying, I felt very deeply burdened to pray for her. So I just told her, can I pray for you? And I just prayed for her for exactly 10 seconds and told her, God just bless and open her womb to have a child. And I shared to her the story of the birth of Samuel, how Hannah was crying because, the second wife of Elkanah was Peninnah, used to keep tormenting her. You know? So I told her, look, your mother is tormenting you. That's why God's given you the spirit to pray. Just keep praying. 10 months later, she sent me a letter from Dubai. Said, dear doctor, please ask God to give me the wisdom to bring up my son Samuel. So it was as astounding as that, you know. So I sometimes feel that God doesn't need us actually, but He does use us. Yeah, that was true, but I don't know who told you the story. It's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I used a mug of water and baptized him. You can baptize anybody in whatever form, you know. Though I believe in immersion baptism, God can understand. It's not possible to do that for him.